discuss the most important topic of all, keeping the American people safe. A little over a year ago, I was sworn into office as the 87th Attorney General of the United States. I came into office with the goal of refocusing the Department of Justice on its core mission after years of bloated bureaucracy and political weaponization. The Department of Justice's core mission is to fight violent crime, protect the American people, and defend the rule of law above all else. While our work is never done, we have made tremendous progress to make America safe again. In 2025, we saw the lowest murder rate in 125 years. That's nothing short of historic. If you compare 25 to 24, here's what you'll find. The murder rate is down 21%, robbery down 23%, carjacking down 43%, gun assault down 22%, ag assault, burglary, could go on and on. Crime is declining. This did not happen by accident. The numbers tell an important yet straightforward story. President Trump has given us the resources, the support, and the leadership to protect the American people. President Trump's policies have saved lives. I cannot think of a policy outcome more important than protecting the lives of American citizens. Can you? This trend has been especially clear in Washington, D.C. and in Memphis. These are two iconic American cities that spent years in the grip of horrific violent crime. The Department of Justice surged law enforcement resources, and the results came quickly. Crime plummeted in both cities. And I want to make one point loud and clear. We achieved those results by working with Democratic mayors. Public safety does not have a party registration. When your constituents call 911, they don't ask for political views of the responding officer. They ask for help. I have federal agents in each and every one of your districts. They're here to help, and I am here to help. Many cities and states have worked with us and taken advantage of our federal support. Some have not. Meanwhile, a few elected officials have declared that they are, quote, at war with the federal government and encouraged widespread obstruction of law enforcement. This has resulted in avoidable clashes on the streets, as you've all seen. We've seen rioters storming a Christian church. Citizens and law enforcement officers have both been endangered by reckless rhetoric. We have made dozens of arrests in and around Minneapolis so far, and many of them could have been avoided by simple compliance with federal law. Of course, our efforts reach beyond our urban centers. We are striking crucial blows against terrorist organizations such as MS-13, TDA, the Sinaloa cartel, and Antifa. And as we sit here, I think you've seen the news this morning. The news is reporting that cartel drones are being shot down by our military. That's what we all should care about right now, protecting America. As we seek to dismantle these drug trafficking networks that poison Americans, in 2025, our DEA agents seized more than 47 million fentanyl pills and more than 9,800 total kilos of fentanyl. That represents 369 million potentially deadly doses that can kill Americans. Meanwhile, our attorneys are fighting for President Trump's agenda in courtrooms across this country. This administration has been sued 627 times. We've fought through a nonstop flood of bad faith temporary restraining orders from liberal activist judges across this country. America has never seen this level of coordinated judicial opposition towards a presidential administration. It is not only an unlawful attack on the executive branch's authority, but a serious attack on the democratic process. In spite of this unprecedented judicial activism, we've attained 24 favorable rulings at the U.S. Supreme Court, their emergency docket, and even more to come. We've done so while ending the weaponization of the prior administration by dropping FACE Act prosecutions, exposing the Arctic frost scandal via congressional disclosure, thank you, Chairman, and restoring one tier of justice in this country. To address the Epstein files, more than 500 attorneys and reviewers spent thousands of hours painstakingly reviewing millions of pages to comply with Congress's law. We've released more than 3 million pages, including 180,000 images, all to the public, while doing our very best in the time frame allotted by the legislation to protect victims. And if you brought us a victim's name that was inadvertently released, we immediately redacted it. All members of Congress, as you know, are invited to visit DOJ to see for yourselves. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the Epstein survivors who are here today. I'm a career prosecutor, and despite what the ranking member said, I have spent my entire career fighting for victims, and I will continue to do so. I am deeply sorry for what any victim has been through, especially as a result of that monster. If you have any information to share with law enforcement about anyone who has hurt you or abused you, the FBI is waiting to hear from you. I want you to know that any accusations of criminal wrongdoing will be taken seriously and investigated. The Department of Justice is committed to holding criminals accountable to the fullest extent of the law. In 2025, the FBI arrested over 1,700 child predators, a 10% increase from 2024. We also located 2,700 victims of child exploitation and shut down 3.8 million dark web pedophile accounts. 3.8 million. So please, if you have information to share that needs to be investigated, contact the FBI. Today, I look forward to discussing further our shared obligation to protect the American people, uphold the rule of law, and keep this nation safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Attorney General. The chair we now proceed under the 5-minute rule. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam General, thank you for your extensive remarks, particularly on your continued investigation of those responsible over the years in the Epstein debacle. Obviously, you have an amazingly full docket between civil rights, between criminal, between so-called white-collar crime, and doing so, as the chairman said, at a time in which both you and the president are under attack, and our ICE agents and FBI and others are under attack when they try to enforce the law. I personally want to.
We have just heard from Pam Bondi. We're now going to go to Professor David K. Johnston, who's a professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, joining us from New York. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. So we just heard some of the comments made by Pam Bondi in her testimony. First, she started stating all the crime numbers that were down by 20% or more that we saw. And then she was starting to say how she has been standing with the victims throughout her whole career. But some victims have come forward and said they haven't felt so safe during these files have been released because they've been exposed. What do you think about that after her comments? Oh, sorry, I think you may be on mute. So we have just heard the testimony of US Attorney General Pam Bondi before the House Judiciary Committee. She has talked about the crime rates before talking about the release of Epstein files. In her
Yes.
For this discussion, we're now being joined by Professor David K. Johnston. We're now being joined by Professor David K. Johnston. Thank you for joining us, and sorry about that little technical difficulty. As I said, Pam Bondi said that she stands with the victims. She's done everything in her power to protect them and said everything she's done, but many of the victims have come forward and have said that they don't feel protected because they've been unredacted, but celebrities and high officials were redacted. What do you think on that?
Well, I'm about to go teach my criminal justice and society course, and I'm sure this will be a topic today because Pam Bondi's remarks were ridiculous. First of all, crime went up during the first Trump administration, and it's been falling ever since. So yes, it's a good thing. Crime in America, reported crimes of all serious kinds have gone down significantly, but that's part of a long-term trend. It has nothing to do with federal law enforcement. It is local and state police agencies that would have responsibility here. Secondly, the redactions and the release of the Epstein files shows a clear pattern by this administration of not properly redacting the names of young women who say they were raped properly so that many of them can be identified, while at the same time, in violation of the law that Trump signed. Notice Pam Bondi called it Congress's law. It's American law signed by Donald Trump, that no one was to have their name withheld who is a perpetrator or suspect or associate to protect their reputation. And yet this was done repeatedly. And only half of the documents have been released. And Congress, in order to see these documents, has to go to a different location. There are only 4 computers. They have minders to watch them. And this is not complying with the law. This is a lawless administration. Furthermore, Donald Trump has been pardoning huge drug dealers, people who move tons of cocaine. Cocaine is sold by the gram. People who moved it by the ton have been pardoned by Donald Trump. He has pardoned sexual predators. He has pardoned serious international money launderers and other criminals. So Pam Bondi's statements are just laughable.
And as you just said, that Trump has pardoned many sexual predators and criminals. In Pam Bondi's speech, she said that 1,700 child predators were located last year. And she said that how throughout the files, they've been wanting to protect the victims and help the victims. But many countries around the world haven't been putting that to use. And for example, with America, the amount of people in the files and nothing's being done about it. Some countries are doing something about it now, finally doing a criminal investigation into it. But for example, in America, they aren't. So what do you think about that statement? Do you think she's completely contradicted herself there?
Yeah, the facts do not support what she said. And it is one of the most curious developments that outside of the United States, we see much more vigorous inquiry and action than in the US. So, for example, King Charles has kicked his brother, Prince Andrew, out of the royal family. He's no longer a prince. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, may well lose his position. Now, he was not in a strong position to begin with, but he may lose his place because he appointed an ambassador to the US who was associated with Epstein. And he was lied to by the ambassador, by the way. Nonetheless, that may cost him his seat. Nothing's happening here in the US. We're not seeing what Pam Bondi claims. Now, there have been a lot of arrests of sexual predators, no question about that. That is an absolute good to the extent they arrest actual predators. One of the concerns of this administration has been arresting people who should not be arrested and detaining people without giving them access to the courts. In some cases, people lawfully in the US have been held for 6 months and been unable to get lawyers, been unable to get access to the courts, a blatant violation of the American Constitution, which applies to all persons in the US, not citizens, all persons. This is just part of the campaign by the Trump administration to divert attention from its fundamentally criminal nature. And it's important to understand that Donald Trump, who I've known and I've spent hundreds of hours with over the last 40 years, Donald Trump is a career white-collar criminal. He's the third generation head of a four-generation white-collar crime family. America has many white-collar crime families, but our legal and criminal justice systems are focused on street crime, not sweet, S-U-I-T-E crime.
Thank you. Don't go too far, as we will be back with you very shortly. We're now being joined by Mark Sutherland, who's a geopolitical commentator, joining us from London. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Mark. So Pam Bondi's done her testimony, she's testified, and she has been saying that they've reviewed 180k images. More than 500 attorneys have reviewed millions of pages. And you would have thought after 500 attorneys who have reviewed the millions of pages that all the victims would be redacted from the files, and they weren't. What do you think on that?
Ellie, being in a position where a dear friend of mine in America actually knows one of the victims personally, I could begin to put myself in their shoes, which is that if they want anonymity, if they haven't been doing podcasts, then they would want to be protected in that way, because some of the victims very bravely have been speaking out for some time, and understandably, and they also need protecting. I understand totally the reason why you raised that question, and also bear in mind David's comments on that as well. What has happened through what has gone on with all the allegations on Epstein Island, etc., when he was convicted in 2009, no words can describe how appalling that is and how reprehensible that is. When you say about the amount of lawyers going through 3.5 million pieces of information, that kind of job is, I mean, where do you even begin within the timescale? David's comment in regard to Starmer, let's just clarify a certain point here, where Peter Mandelson, who was appointed as American ambassador, and then that was taken away because of his relationship with Epstein, which has been going on for a considerable amount of time. In that case, the concern is the fact that Mandelson was then feeding financial information from cabinet records, from meetings to Epstein, in regard to, as it's being put out there, that Gordon Brown was overseeing the fact that the European leaders had agreed to a 500 billion euro bailout in regard to the banks, the crisis with the banks in 2009, 2010. That is the big issue in regard to information being passed on in regard to the UK. But coming back to the victims and what they have suffered, you are right, because many of those would like to be protected. Some of them, as I say, have been brave enough to speak out on what they have been through to raise profile of these issues. Ellie.
We're just going to quickly go back to the testimony to listen to the statements being made by the US Attorney General. Don't go too far, Mark, as we will come back to you in just a moment.
Agreement, Lafarge was required to pay more than $775 million into DOJ's asset forfeiture fund. In February 2025, my colleagues and I sent you a letter urging the department to review the petitions for remission submitted by the families of those fallen service members, including several of my constituents. The previous administration ignored these victims and our requests and left their petitions unresolved. My question for you on this particular issue is if you're willing to work to ensure those families that their petitions will be reviewed and brought to a resolution.
Congressman, we are aware of that, and we're committed to doing everything we can to support the victims and work with you. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, appreciate your answer. And now let's go to something that is also pressing that I've been working on for years, and this is the FISA Section 702 and Arctic frost. In January 2025, you testified before the U.S. Senate and agreed with Senator Lee that, quote, anytime an American citizen's private communications are intercepted or stored, whether through incidental collection or otherwise, those communications should not be searched without some showing of probable cause, close quote. You still hold that view today, I assume?
Yes.
And during the most recent FISA reauthorization, I offered an amendment to establish a clear warrant requirement for searches of Americans' data while preserving every publicly cited operational exception, including emergencies, defensive queries, cybersecurity threats. And my intent was to ensure the Department of Justice could continue to keep Americans safe while also ending warrantless searches of U.S. persons' data. Are there any additional circumstances or exceptions that you believe must be included to ensure DOJ can continue to operate effectively while still protecting American citizens' data and privacy?
Yeah, Congressman, we are committed to working with Congress to uncover weaponization and other misconduct by Jack Smith, by others, Arctic frost, everything that happened under the past administration. And we are committed to working with you on that. And we are working with Chairman Jordan, with the House Intel, with all of our, my fellow cabinet members on resolving that issue.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad you brought up Arctic frost, because Section 702 was used in the Arctic frost investigation.
It was.
And information derived was used by Special Counsel Jack Smith. And my question has always been, and no one's been able to answer this, is what was the legal predicate for using a foreign intelligence authority in the Arctic frost investigation? Have you been able to ascertain any legal predicate?
Congressman, what I can tell you today is that has been referred to my office. I can't discuss anything regarding that because it is very active and ongoing.
And you probably can't answer this one either, but I really want to know if Section 702 queries related to that matter involved members of Congress, which we know at some level it did, congressional staff, which we know at some level did. We've heard that journalists or other U.S. persons not suspecting of acting as foreign agents were also caught up in that. Can you answer that question and say whether queries did cover all those groups I just identified?
It is a very active pending investigation within my office. However, I believe many members of Congress have stated that their phones were part of Arctic frost. We are well aware of that, and we are taking this very seriously, and this is a very active investigation. And I would keep going and say, if any member of the Democrat Party, if any of them, if that had happened to them, we would take that just as serious as we do. And they should be jumping up and down, screaming, supporting you and what you want to do, because this should be a bipartisan issue.
Well, I hope it is a bipartisan issue. You know, I'll just leave with these last couple of questions, which I'm sure fall into the same investigation privilege. But that's this: how many such queries were actually conducted overall? This is outside Arctic frost in the prior year by the FBI or other intelligence community. And particularly, we really need to know what were the legal standards applied? Did they use probable cause? Did they use reasonable articulable suspicion? Or did they have no individualized suspicion and just were gathering up information? And that's beyond the investigation regarding Arctic frost. I don't expect you to have that information today, but if you can help get that information so we can understand the extensive nature of this continued misuse of 702, it would be very particularly helpful.
And it was extensive. Yes, Congressman. Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
I have a UC, Mr. Chairman.
And that is the gentlelady from Texas.
I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record. El Paso airspace reopened after FAA quickly rescinds 10-day flights restriction. This was published by the Texas Tribune on February 11th, 2026, and it says it was because of an impasse with the DOD over the use of unmanned military aircraft and not triggered by Mexican cartel drones.
Without objection.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I didn't hear back about the second round of questions. I assume that's not happening. I just want to be able to assure the members, certainly on my side, if not both sides.
That's not a point of order.
No, that every member will get 5 minutes with the witness. Will there be 5 minutes for each?
Yeah, you get 5 minutes, yeah.
With the witness, okay,
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah, okay. And are you up next? Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I want to begin by acknowledging the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's horrific abuse who are in the room with us today. I want to thank all of you for your bravery in speaking out. I want to say that you and the other survivors of these heinous crimes deserve better from this Department of Justice. In particular, it is shocking that the department did not redact the names of Epstein's victims, but it did redact the names of their abusers. I don't know whether this was done out of incompetence or whether it was deliberate and malicious, but either way, it is completely unacceptable. Even more troubling, the DOJ has failed to bring any of these perpetrators to justice. Instead, it has engaged in a relentless pursuit of Donald Trump's perceived enemies. I want to focus on just one example. The Attorney General of my home state of New York, Tish James. This DOJ has been hell-bent on securing an indictment against Ms. James for something, anything, simply because she held Donald Trump's companies accountable for years of financial fraud. And indeed, the department manufactured an investigation against her for alleged, quote, mortgage fraud. But the U.S. attorney leading the investigation, Eric Siebert, a Trump appointee, refused to bring charges against Ms. James because there was simply no evidence. Unfortunately, a prosecutor who refuses to do Trump's bidding has no place in this DOJ, so Mr. Siebert was forced out. Trump could not contain his fury that he expressed to you in a social media post addressed to you by name. I'm sure you've seen it. Quote, I fired him and there is a great case, he wrote to you about Mr. Siebert. Then we moved down. We can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now. And obviously, you followed that order. Lindsay Halligan, Trump's former defense lawyer who had never prosecuted a case in her life, was installed to replace Mr. Siebert, and it was clear that part of her mandate was to go after Ms. James. Halligan immediately sought an indictment, which a court dismissed because Halligan was illegally put into the role. But your department was undeterred. And not once, but twice, it tried to indict Attorney General James in separate courts. Both grand juries rejected you and refused to indict her. It is practically unheard of for a grand jury to refuse an indictment. In 2016, it happened in just 6 cases out of over 150,000 offenses. And you had it happen twice in the same week, in 2 different courts. That must have been humiliating. And now there are reports you are continuing to investigate.
We are now being joined again by Mark Sutherland. Thank you for joining us back here. So, as we just heard, there are people there who have also agreed that the DOJ hasn't done a good enough job for these victims and have actually done a better job for the perpetrators in the files. And they keep talking about the crime rates and how they've bettered the crime rates. But again, we can see that people are counteracting these claims with facts. What do you have to say about on this matter with what Congress have been saying back?
Right, Ellie, sorry, I because of technical issues your end, I couldn't hear all of the comments that are being made. But I will say this: there is lawfare abounds in regard to crime rates falling, going up. I can't see the figures in front of me. I can't make a comment on that. But I'm just gonna go back in a little bit of history, where under the 4 years of the Biden administration, we had January the 6th. We then had the Star Chamber then arresting 1,600 U.S. Citizens for exercising their constitutional rights on the 6th of January 2021. People may say, well, what's that got to do with what's happening in regard to in regard to Epstein files, in regard to comments on whether criminal figures are going up and down, and the accusations of lawfare. Well, if there was one big accusation of lawfare, it was over Jan 6, because that is then what happened in how all of that was staged. Now, the big challenge, this is personal opinion, the big challenge to the Republican Party, to Pam Bondi as DOJ, to Kash Patel, head of the FBI, and everyone else, is to turn around and say, well, we have to be better, far better than the previous administration. We have had all these, understandably, when we've had people like Jack Smith, when people have tried to indict within New York, President Trump and elsewhere, where there is an abuse of the law. That is what's happened. But the big challenge to the Republicans is then to be seen, and to the Trump administration, is to be seen whiter than white, and to actually uphold the law. And I believe that is the conversation that we are then seeing unfold, if we're going to have to listen to people like Nadler then espousing whatever they are from the depth of Congress amongst the nice oak wooden paneling. Then all of these people like him, like Schumer's past as well, have to all be brought into question, because are they there for the good of the American people, or are they there just for themselves and their own political gain, and at times with various people their own financial gain? Jan 6 is still, and has to be still, under the spotlight, where to the Democrats they would rather sweep that all under the carpet, because they do know that there was such a precedent, and there's been other times in American history when law has been abused against its opponents. Ellie.
Thank you, Mark. Don't go too far, as we will come back to you just after this quick break. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.